Today, I will present research discussing the relative impact that intonational nuclear tunes and syntactic sentence types have on speech act meaning. Specifically, my project seeks to answer the question of, to what degree is the influence of intonation on speech act meaning independent from that of the sentence type? Historically, there have been two main approaches to answering this question. Compositional accounts suggest that the influence of intonation on speech act meaning is independent from that of the sentence type, while non-compositional accounts suggest that the impact of intonation is dependent on the sentence type. And while compositional accounts of tunes like low star high high have been proposed, not many have been experimentally tested. For example, in the figure on the right along the top row, Zhang in her 2018 thesis proposes a non-compositional account of rising declaratives. She suggests that rising declaratives, as shown on the far left, call off the speaker's commitment to the proposition, resulting in speech acts like questions, while falling declaratives on the far right maintain the speaker's commitment to the proposition, resulting in speech acts like assertions. Shallow rising imperatives fall somewhere in the middle, conveying speech acts like tentative assertions. While Zhang's account is a non-compositional one, she suggests that her proposal is equally compatible with a compositional account, but that this would require an investigation of these same tunes with an alternative sentence type, which is exactly what my project aims to do. Along the bottom row, Rudin in his 2018 thesis proposes a compositional account of rising declaratives by suggesting that rising and falling tunes have the same impact on speaker commitment for imperatives as they do for declaratives. For example, he suggests that rising imperatives call off the speaker's commitment to a preference for action rather than a proposition, resulting in speech acts like suggestions, while falling imperatives maintain the speaker's commitment to that preference for action, resulting in speech acts like commands. However, he does not experimentally test this proposal, and he also does not investigate the impact of shallow rising tunes on the imperative sentence type, a question which my project also seeks to answer. So overall, my study seeks to provide support for a compositional account by illustrating that rising and falling tunes have similar effects on speaker commitment for imperatives as they do for declaratives, resulting in similar types of speech act meaning. Specifically, I hypothesize that as we move from falling imperatives to shallow falling imperatives to shallow rising to steep rising imperatives, we should see a decrease in the speaker's commitment to a preference for action, as shown by an increase in the likelihood of a suggestion speech act response as opposed to a command. In this study, we had 18 imperative sentences produced by a female native speaker of English. Each sentence was resynthesized so that with respect to the F0 peak of the nuclear pitch accent, the final F0 was -10 semitones for the steep fall, -6 for the shallow fall, +6 for the shallow rise, and +10 for the steep rise. Each sentence was preceded by a written context, either a suggestion or command. So for example, in the figure below, on the right side is an example of a suggestion context where the speaker is described as someone of equal authority to the listener. And on the left side is an example of a command context where the speaker is described as someone of greater authority than the listener. Participants then completed a 2 alternative forced choice task where they were asked to judge each utterance as a suggestion or a command. Logistic mixed effects regression then modeled participants' responses as a function of the tune and context interaction, gender, and list. In experiment 1, we investigate the differences between steep falls, shallow rises, and steep rises. And in experiment 2, we look at the difference between steep rises, shallow falls, and steep falls. Overall, our results largely mirror Zhang's. So in the panel on the left for experiment 1, as we move from steep falls to shallow rises to steep rises, there is an increase in the likelihood of a suggestion response, just as Zhang saw an increase in the likelihood of a question response for declaratives. Furthermore, there is a significant difference in the likelihood of a suggestion response for steep rises than for shallow rises. So the likelihood of a suggestion response was significantly more likely for steep rises than shallow rises. On the right-hand side, we see a similar pattern for falls. So as we move from, in experiment 2, so as we move from steep rises to shallow falls to steep falls, the likelihood of a command suggestion increases. However, this time there is not a significant difference in the likelihood of a command response for shallow falls as opposed to steep falls. So overall, my study provides partial support for a compositional account of tune and type meaning by illustrating that rising and falling tunes have similar effects on speaker commitment for imperatives as they do for declaratives, resulting in similar types of speech act meaning. Furthermore, it suggests that within category variation for a single tune in terms of the pitch span, so shallow fall or shallow rises versus steep rises, has the potential to convey consistent distinctions in meaning across sentence type. However, we did not find that there was a significant difference between shallow falls and steep falls. And we know that the falling tune is considered the default tune for the imperative sentence type. So this might suggest that the ability of gradient variation in pitch band to convey consistent distinctions in meaning across sentence type is limited to the non-default pairing of tune and sentence type. However, while the model results suggested a significant difference between the two rises and not between the falls, this result was not clearly reflected in the descriptive results. So this hypothesis would be better supported with further replication studies. Thank you so much for listening.